Ria had always been an outsider in her in-laws' home, even though she had been married to Arav for 2 years. She tried so hard to fit in, to be a part of their family. But no matter how hard she tried, there was always a wall between her and them. At first, it was small things. The way they would smile at her, but the smile never reached their eyes. The way they would greet her, but it felt forced, as if they didn't really want her there. But as time passed, the little things began to pile up, and she noticed. It was the way her mother-in-law would ask about her cooking skills, yet never let Ria cook at family dinners. The way her father-in-law would nod politely when she spoke, but never really listened. The way her sister-in-law would call her sweet, but never made an effort to get to know her. Ria felt like a stranger in a house she was supposed to call her own. It was hard to explain, but there was always a coldness in the air, like she was not truly welcome. It wasn't that they were mean or rude. They just seemed indifferent, distant. It didn't help that every time they had a family dinner, Ria felt sick. It wasn't anything that anyone could see or notice. It wasn't like she was throwing up or anything dramatic. But after every meal, she would feel weak, nauseous, and dizzy. She had no idea why it happened, but it had been going on for months. She had tried everything. She thought it might be the spices, or maybe the food was too greasy. But no matter what, every time she ate her in-laws' cooking, she felt unwell. At first, she told herself it was just in her head. But as time went on, she began to wonder if something more was going on. But no one noticed. No one seemed to care. Tonight, they had invited her over for another dinner. Ria had been dreading it all week. The thought of sitting through another meal, feeling sick again, was making her stomach churn. But she couldn't say no. Arav would be there, and she didn't want to disappoint him. He didn't know about the way she felt at her in-laws' house. He never noticed the coldness, the way things always felt off. So she decided this time would be different. This time, she would bring her own food. Ria was nervous as she packed a small container of food into a bag. It was simple, a bowl of vegetable curry and rice that she had made herself. She knew it would be safe. She wouldn't have to worry about feeling sick after eating it. When she arrived at her in-laws' house, the usual greetings were exchanged. Her mother-in-law smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was polite. Arab's father gave her a nod, as usual, but didn't say much. The whole atmosphere was the same as it always was. Cold, detached. Ria tried to act normal, but the tension in the air made her feel even more uncomfortable. She set her container of food down on the kitchen counter, her hands shaking slightly. Would they ask about it? Would they notice? Her mother-in-law called them all to the dining table, and Ria took her seat quietly, placing her food in front of her. She didn't want to make a big deal of it. It was just a simple meal. Nothing strange about it. But as she looked around the table, she noticed the way everyone was looking at her. It wasn't a direct stare, but there was something about the way they kept glancing at her food. Ria tried to ignore it, but her mind raced. What was going on? Why were they acting this way? Why did it always feel like something was wrong, like they were hiding something from her? Her heart started to beat faster, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. She was starting to feel like she didn't belong there at all. She had always been the outsider, but tonight, the feeling was even stronger. She took a bite of her own food, trying to focus on something other than the eyes that seemed to be following her every move. But as soon as the taste of the curry hit her tongue, she felt a sense of relief. It wasn't just the food that made her feel better. It was the feeling of control. She had brought this meal herself. She had chosen what went into it. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. But as the evening went on, Ria couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her in-laws were acting strange. They were talking in hushed voices, exchanging looks when they thought she wasn't paying attention. It was subtle, but Ria could feel it. There was something they weren't telling her. Her stomach tightened with unease, and she found herself glancing at the clock. She wanted to leave. She wanted to get out of there. But she stayed, sitting at the table, trying to pretend everything was fine. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Maybe that tonight would be different. That tonight, she would finally feel like she was a part of their family. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was never going to feel at home here, no matter how hard she tried. As the evening wore on, she felt her unease growing. She didn't know what it was, but something was wrong. The question that had been lingering in the back of her mind for months now came rushing to the forefront. What was happening to her? As the evening continued, Raya couldn't shake the unease that was building in her chest. She sat at the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to maintain a polite smile, but the tension was so thick in the room that it felt suffocating. The conversation at the table was light at first. Her father-in-law asked about her work, her mother-in-law made small talk about the weather, and her sister-in-law, Simran, chimed in about the latest family gossip. But no one seemed truly engaged. Their words were polite, but there was something missing. A warmth, an honesty that made it feel like they were just going through the motions. Raya could feel it. She always could. This wasn't just a normal dinner with the in-laws. Something was off. They were all avoiding her gaze. When she glanced up, she could see them exchanging quiet glances, as if there was some silent conversation happening right under her nose. And it wasn't just the adults. Even Arav, her husband, seemed distracted. He kept glancing at his phone, his focus not fully on the table. His once warm gaze, that always made her feel at home, now seemed distant. Her mind was racing. Why did everything feel so strange tonight? Was it just her imagination, or was there something more going on? She glanced at her plate, pretending to focus on her food, but even the quiet sound of the fork against the plate seemed louder than usual. Her own meal, the one she had brought to avoid feeling sick, was now the center of attention. She tried not to notice the way her mother-in-law kept stealing glances at it, her lips pressed tightly together, as though she was trying not to say something. Raya's stomach tightened, the unease growing heavier with every passing second. She had a feeling that tonight was going to be different. It wasn't just the food or the strange glances. It was the entire atmosphere. She had never felt so out of place before. Trying to distract herself, she took another bite of her curry. It was mild, comforting, and familiar. It was the only thing that made her feel grounded in the chaos of her emotions. But even the food couldn't calm the knot in her stomach. There was something unsettling in the air, something she couldn't explain. And then, as if on cue, the conversation shifted. Her father-in-law cleared his throat and glanced at her, his face unusually serious. "So, Ria," he began, his tone colder than she was used to, "how's everything going at home with Arav? Are you both comfortable?" His question was polite, but there was a sharpness behind it. The kind of question that made Ria feel as though she was being judged, even though they had never really spoken openly about their relationship. It was a strange question, almost too personal for a casual dinner. Raya swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She looked over at Arav, who was still preoccupied with his phone. It was as if he hadn't even heard his father's question. Her heart sank. She had always believed that Arav would stand up for her, that he would be her voice when things got tough. But tonight, he seemed distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. "Well," Ria said, forcing a smile, "we're doing fine, just busy with work and life. You know how it is." Her mother-in-law nodded, but there was a strange look in her eyes, one Ria couldn't quite place. It was as if her mother-in-law was studying her, trying to figure out something about her. And for the first time, Raya felt uncomfortable under her gaze. The silence that followed was heavy. Simran, her sister-in-law, shifted in her seat and glanced at Ria, but there was no warmth in her eyes, no hint of affection like before. Instead, Simran's gaze was calculating, almost as if she was waiting for something to happen. Raya's thoughts were interrupted by a soft but distinct sound coming from the kitchen. It was the sound of something being moved, followed by a muffled voice. Ria turned her head instinctively, and for a brief moment, her eyes met her mother-in-law's. Her mother-in-law quickly looked away, her lips curling into a tight, forced smile. "Oh, don't mind me," she said quickly. "I just need to check on the dessert." But the way she spoke sounded like she was trying to cover something up. Something wasn't right. Rhea felt her pulse quicken. What was her mother-in-law hiding? What was happening in the kitchen? Her curiosity was growing stronger with each passing second, but she didn't want to draw attention to herself. Instead, she took another bite of her meal, trying to act normal. But the more she thought about it, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She could feel it in her bones, the subtle tension, the strange behavior, the way her in-laws kept looking at her food, at her. It was as if they were all waiting for her to do something, to say something, as if they were testing her. The feeling in her chest grew stronger. This wasn't just a normal family dinner. This was something else entirely. The game was changing, and Rhea wasn't sure she was ready for whatever was coming next. Her mind raced with questions. Why had they invited her over tonight? Why was everyone acting so differently? What was it that they were keeping from her? Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the edge of discovering something that could change everything. And as the evening wore on, her discomfort only grew. Every time she caught her in-laws' eyes, she could see the unease in their expressions. They were hiding something. She was sure of it now. The sound of her phone vibrating on the table broke her thoughts, and she quickly glanced down to see a message from Araf. "Everything okay? You seem quiet tonight." Rhea hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the phone screen. What was she supposed to say? Should she tell him what she was feeling? Should she tell him that something was wrong? That she felt like a stranger in her own home? But she didn't. Instead, she just sent a quick reply. "I'm fine. Just a bit tired." A lie. The rest of the evening dragged on like a slow, unbearable fog. Rhea felt like a prisoner in her own body, trapped in the cold, unfamiliar atmosphere of her in-laws' home. Her thoughts swirled in confusion, each new glance from her mother-in-law or father-in-law sending a fresh jolt of anxiety through her chest. The sounds of silverware clinking, soft murmurings of conversation, and the occasional laugh from Simran all seemed distant and hollow. Every passing minute made Rhea feel more isolated, more like an outsider. Despite being surrounded by family, it felt as though she were sitting in a room full of strangers. Rhea tried to distract herself by eating more of her curry, focusing on the comforting taste of the dish she'd made herself. She needed something to ground her, something to keep her from spiraling into panic. Yet, no matter how much she tried to stay focused on her food, her mind kept racing back to the strange atmosphere. As she took another bite, she noticed that her mother-in-law was no longer in the dining room. In fact, it had been a while since anyone had seen her leave. Rhea glanced around. Simran was now talking to Araf, who, once again, seemed absorbed in his phone. He was laughing at something Simran had said, his attention fully on his sister. Rhea couldn't help but feel a twinge of hurt. Why wasn't he paying attention to her? Why didn't he notice that something was wrong? A low, unsettling noise came from the kitchen, followed by the soft clatter of dishes. Rhea instinctively looked up, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mother-in-law had returned and was carrying something in her hands, something that looked strange. Rhea's curiosity piqued, but she quickly tried to look away. It was too much. She didn't want to know, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her gut that something wasn't right. Her mother-in-law was acting oddly. She had a tight-lipped expression, as if she was hiding something. She placed a small bowl on the table and looked around, as if making sure no one was watching before taking her seat again. Rhea's heart skipped a beat. What was that bowl? Why was it hidden away so quickly? Her mother-in-law caught her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes locked. For the briefest of seconds, Rhea saw something in her mother-in-law's eyes, something that sent a chill down her spine. It was fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of something Rhea couldn't quite understand. Rhea quickly turned her attention back to her plate, trying to keep her expression neutral, though her mind was spinning. She had to know what was going on. She had to know what her in-laws were hiding from her. And just as if fate had decided to push her closer to the truth, Arav's voice suddenly broke the silence. "Ria, could you pass the salt?" he asked, his voice casual, like nothing was wrong. She looked at him, trying to hide her confusion, and handed him the salt shaker. As their hands brushed briefly, she felt an unfamiliar distance between them. It wasn't just the physical space. It was the emotional gap that seemed to be widening with every minute. She felt her pulse quicken. There was something wrong. She could feel it in her bones. But what was it? What had changed so suddenly? Without thinking, Ria excused herself and got up from the table, making her way toward the kitchen. It wasn't like her to act impulsively, but tonight everything felt different. Her body moved almost on its own, as if some hidden instinct was pushing her forward. As she stepped into the kitchen, she was met with the faint smell of something burning. Her mother-in-law was standing over the stove, stirring a pot. The faintest trace of smoke hung in the air, and her mother-in-law was wiping her hands nervously. "Oh, Ria," she said, turning around quickly, her face a little flushed. "I didn't expect you to come in here. You're not supposed to see this yet." Ria blinked, taken aback by her mother-in-law's odd reaction. "What do you mean? See what?" Her voice was steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. Her mother-in-law quickly smiled, trying to cover up her discomfort. "Nothing, nothing. I was just finishing up a little surprise for everyone. Don't mind me." But Ria wasn't convinced. The way her mother-in-law's voice trembled, the way her eyes shifted nervously, told Ria everything she needed to know. There was something more. There was something hidden here. Before Ria could say anything else, her mother-in-law moved quickly to the side, blocking her view of the counter. But in that split second, Ria caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye. A small, unmarked bottle, half hidden behind a stack of napkins. Ria froze. The bottle was familiar. Too familiar. She had seen it before. It was a bottle of something that her in-laws had always kept hidden from her. Something that didn't belong in the kitchen. It was a substance she had only ever seen in specialized stores. And that wasn't all. Ria remembered something from a while back. How she had felt sick after the family dinners. How the dizziness and nausea always seemed to follow the meals her mother-in-law cooked. Ria felt a surge of panic. Could it be? Was this why she had been feeling sick all this time? Her mind raced as she fought to keep her emotions in check. She couldn't let her mother-in-law know she had seen the bottle. Not yet. She needed to be sure. "Ria, dear," her mother-in-law said again, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I think you should go back to the table. Dinner is almost finished. We wouldn't want you to miss out on the dessert." But Ria wasn't listening. Her mind was spinning, and the questions in her head were only growing louder. What was going on in this house? What had her in-laws been hiding from her? And most importantly, why did it feel like she was only just beginning to uncover the truth? Ria's heart pounded as she turned back toward the dining room, her mind still reeling from what she had just seen. The bottle her mother-in-law had tried to hide. It was unmistakable, and for a moment, Ria wondered if she was imagining things. But the more she thought about it, the more certain she became. That bottle wasn't just any bottle. It was something that shouldn't have been in her in-law's kitchen, especially not when it came to the food she was eating. Ria's mind raced as she walked back into the dining room. She could still feel the heat of the kitchen on her skin, the tension in the air suffocating her. The silence around the table seemed deafening now, and the faces of her family looked so distant. Arav was still on his phone, tapping away, unaware of the storm brewing in Ria's mind. Simran was talking quietly to her father, but even she seemed like she was avoiding Ria's gaze. It was as if they were all in on something, some secret that Ria wasn't supposed to know about. The weight of it all pressed down on her, making her feel small, invisible. Ria sat back down slowly, the chair creaking under her weight. She forced herself to breathe, to calm her racing thoughts. Whatever this was, Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. Something inside her told her that the truth was just beyond her reach, but she needed more pieces of the puzzle to make sense of it all. As she glanced down at her plate, she noticed something odd. Her food, the meal she had brought to avoid getting sick, now seemed so ordinary, so out of place. It was as if the very meal she had thought would protect her had now become a symbol of everything that was wrong. The thought made her stomach churn. Her mother-in-law returned to the table, carrying a small bowl of dessert, which she placed carefully in the center of the table. Everyone shifted slightly, and there was a collective exhale. Dessert, at last. But Rhea couldn't focus on the sweet treats. She couldn't take her eyes off her mother-in-law. The way she moved was deliberate, almost like she was hiding something. Her movements were too careful, too practiced. Rhea's eyes flicked toward Arav again. He had noticed the change in her expression now. His face softened, but before he could say anything, her father-in-law cleared his throat and spoke. "Rhea," he said in a tone that made Rhea's skin prickle, "I hope you're enjoying the dinner. I know it's been a long night, but we're family, and we want you to feel comfortable here." There was something in his tone, something cold. It wasn't a welcoming tone at all. It felt almost like a warning. Rhea's pulse quickened again. What was he trying to say? "I'm enjoying it. Thank you," Rhea replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. But she wasn't convinced. Not by any of them. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. They were hiding something. And she was starting to think it wasn't just about the food. Arav looked up from his phone then, his brow furrowing in concern. "Is everything okay, Rhea?" he asked, his voice gentle but distracted. Rhea forced a smile, trying to act normal. "Yes, everything's fine," she said, even though she felt anything but fine. She didn't want to worry him. Not yet. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't keep this secret from him. He had to know what was going on. But then, just as she was about to speak, her mother-in-law interrupted, offering her dessert with a little too much enthusiasm. "Please, have some dessert, Rhea," she urged, her eyes shining a little too brightly. "You deserve it after such a long day." Rhea looked at the bowl in front of her, its contents a creamy golden mixture that smelled sweet but unfamiliar. She stared at it for a moment, wondering what it was that made her feel so uneasy. Her mother-in-law's insistence felt too strong, too urgent. It was almost like she was trying to force Rhea into eating it. Despite her growing suspicion, Rhea took a small spoonful. Her mother-in-law smiled in approval, but Rhea barely noticed it. She was too focused on the feeling in her chest, the same tightness that had started when she first walked into the house. Rhea slowly chewed the dessert, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. As she swallowed, a strange sensation washed over her. Her stomach twisted in discomfort, and she felt a wave of dizziness. It wasn't as bad as before, but it was enough to make her pause. "I'm sorry," Rhea muttered, setting her spoon down, her hand shaking slightly. "I'm not feeling well." Arav looked up in alarm. "Rhea, are you okay?" he asked, his voice sharp now. "You've been sick all evening. What's going on?" Rhea didn't answer right away. She looked around the table at her in-laws, their eyes now fixed on her. There was something in their expressions, something that made her feel cold all over. Her mother-in-law quickly stood up, her face tight with an emotion Rhea couldn't quite identify. "Oh, you're just tired, dear," she said quickly. "It's probably nothing. We've all had long days." But Rhea wasn't convinced. She felt the dizziness coming on stronger now. And it wasn't just from the dessert. It was from something else. Something deeper. She looked up at Arav, meeting his eyes, and for a split second, she saw a flicker of concern in his gaze. But just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Rhea's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't sit there pretending like everything was fine when she knew, deep down, that something was horribly wrong. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to go," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "I don't feel well, and I need some air." Arav stood up immediately, his face filled with worry. "Rhea, what's happening? You're scaring me." But Rhea shook her head, not wanting to explain. She just needed to get out of that house. She needed to be away from her in-laws, away from the strange tension that hung in the air. And most of all, she needed to figure out what was really going on. As she made her way toward the door, her heart racing, she couldn't help but wonder, what was she walking into? What had her mother-in-law and the rest of the family been hiding? The truth was just within her reach, but it felt like an impossible thing to grasp. And as Rhea stepped out into the cold night air, she knew that she was on the verge of something big. Something that could change everything she thought she knew about her in-laws, and maybe even about her marriage. The cold night air bit at Rhea's skin as she stepped outside, her heart still hammering in her chest. She felt dizzy and disoriented, but more than anything, she felt the weight of the truth hanging just out of reach. As she walked further away from the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening, something that involved more than just her illness. Her mind raced, each thought tumbling over the other as she tried to make sense of everything she had seen and heard. Arav had followed her out, his voice calling her name from behind. "Rhea, wait. Where are you going? What's wrong?" But Rhea didn't stop. She needed to think, needed space to breathe. The moment she had stepped outside, she had felt a small sense of relief. The cool air cleared her mind, even if just for a moment. She knew she couldn't let her emotions rule her now. She had to figure this out. Rhea stopped walking and turned to face Arav. His worried expression softened her heart for a moment, but she knew that this wasn't about her feelings anymore. It was about the truth, and the truth was something far bigger than either of them had realized. "Arav," Rhea said quietly, her voice trembling. "I need to know what's going on. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not." Arav opened his mouth to respond, but Rhea cut him off. "Don't lie to me," she said, her eyes searching his face. "I've seen enough. I know something's wrong." There was a long pause. Arav stood there, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded, his expression changing from one of concern to something darker, more resigned. "Rhea, I never wanted you to find out like this," he said quietly, his voice strained. "But you're right. You deserve to know the truth." Rhea's breath caught in her throat. Her heart started to race again. But this time, there was no turning back. She needed to hear what he was going to say. "I don't understand," Rhea whispered, her voice cracking. "What truth?" Arav glanced over his shoulder toward the house, as if making sure no one else was listening. His voice dropped to a whisper as he stepped closer to Rhea. "It's about my family. They've been hiding something from you, something that goes back a long time." Rhea felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" she asked, barely able to breathe. Arav hesitated, his eyes filled with guilt. "You remember that bottle you saw in the kitchen?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rhea nodded, her stomach twisting. "Yes. What was it? It wasn't just normal food, was it?" "No," Arav said, his voice low and filled with regret. "It wasn't. That bottle. It's not for cooking. It's something else, something my family has been using for years. And it's been making you sick, Rhea. It's not in your head. They've been putting something in the food." Rhea's heart dropped. "What do you mean? Why would they do that?" she demanded, her voice rising with disbelief and anger. Arav ran a hand through his hair, frustration and regret written all over his face. "My family's always had secrets, Rhea. My mother, she's always been obsessed with maintaining control over everything. She's been using that substance in the food to make people feel sick, to keep them dependent. She's done it to me too. And when you started getting sick, she didn't want you to know. She didn't want anyone to know." Raya felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Her legs felt weak, and for a moment, she feared she might collapse. But why? Why me? Why are they doing this to me? Arav's face twisted in pain. Because they didn't want you to get too comfortable. They wanted to control you, to keep you from seeing the truth about their family. They wanted you to feel weak, to feel like you couldn't question anything. And they knew that if you kept getting sick, you wouldn't be able to leave them, because you'd be too dependent on their care. Raya's mind spun as she tried to process his words. It was almost too much to take in. The idea that her in-laws, the people who had always seemed so kind, had been poisoning her, keeping her sick on purpose, felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. But the more she thought about it, the more the pieces fell into place. The sickness that had come out of nowhere, the dizziness, the weakness, it had all made sense in an awful, twisted way. "I can't believe this," Rhea said, her voice hollow. "How could they do this to me, Arav? I trusted them. I trusted you." Arav's face softened with regret. "I didn't know until recently, Rhea. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. But now I know, and I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." Rhea shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "But you didn't. You let it happen. And now I don't know what to do." Arav reached out to her, his hand trembling. "Rhea, please, I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. But I'm going to fix this. We're going to fix this, together." Rhea stared at him, the anger and hurt still burning inside her. But something about the way he said it, the vulnerability in his eyes, made her hesitate. Could she really forgive him? Could she trust him again after all this? Before she could answer, she heard a sound from behind them. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. From the shadows of the front door, she saw her mother-in-law standing there, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. "I'm afraid it's too late for that," she said, her voice sharp and final. Raida's blood ran cold. Her mother-in-law had been listening. She had been watching the entire time. "Mom," Arav exclaimed, his face pale with shock. "What are you doing here?" His mother stepped forward, a cruel smile on her face. "I couldn't let you two have this conversation in private, could I? Not when you're about to ruin everything." Raya's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. The truth was out. And now, everything was about to change. Rhea felt her body go cold as her mother-in-law stepped forward, her eyes sharp and unrelenting. The air around them seemed to thicken, the tension so palpable it almost suffocated her. Arav was standing beside her, but his presence no longer felt comforting. It felt distant, like they were now two strangers facing an inevitable confrontation. "I knew you'd find out sooner or later," her mother-in-law continued, her voice cold and full of calculated indifference. "I just didn't think it would happen like this. But you're right, Rhea. It's true. We've been keeping you sick. We needed you to stay dependent on us, on me. You were getting too comfortable in our world. And that wasn't part of the plan." Raya's heart pounded in her chest, her mind struggling to comprehend the full extent of what her mother-in-law was saying. "You did this to me. Why? Why would you go to such lengths?" Her mother-in-law's lips curled into a thin, almost mocking smile. "Because I could. Because I could control you, manipulate you into believing that you needed us. You weren't supposed to question anything. You were supposed to fall in line like everyone else." Arav stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Mom, why? Why would you do this to Rhea? To our family?" His mother's expression hardened. "You've always been too soft, Arav. Too blinded by your love for her. This wasn't about love. This was about power. You never understood that. But now that you do, I don't care anymore. I'm not going to let you ruin everything we've built. You're not going to take it away from me." The words hit Rhea like a slap to the face. She turned to Arav, her heart breaking all over again. "Arav, is this true? Did you know about this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. Arav looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "Ria, I didn't know. I swear. I never knew what she was doing. But his mother interrupted, her voice rising in anger. "Don't listen to him, Ria. He's weak. He always has been. And so are you. You thought you could walk away from this family, but you're too caught up in our web. You'll never escape. Not now. Not ever." Ria's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming anger that had built up inside her. How could she have trusted them? How could she have been so blind? "You're wrong," Ria said, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not weak. And I won't let you do this anymore." Her mother-in-law's eyes flashed with a mix of fury and disbelief. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Ria replied, her tone firm and resolute. "I'm done. With all of it. I'm done being controlled. I'm done being lied to. And I'm done letting you hurt me, hurt us, for your own selfish reasons." Arav stood still, torn between his loyalty to his mother and the love he felt for Ria. He knew he had failed her. He had failed to see the truth for too long. But it wasn't too late. It couldn't be. He turned to his mother, his voice shaky but determined. "You're wrong, Mom. Ria's right. It ends here. No more lies. No more secrets. We're leaving." His mother's face turned white with fury. "You think you can just walk away? You think I'll let you ruin everything?" "I'm not walking away, Mom," Arav said, his voice cold now. "I'm standing up for what's right. And I'm taking Ria with me. If you want to keep living in your web of lies and manipulation, fine. But I'm done. And so is she." Ria couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She had never felt so broken, so betrayed. But there was something else growing inside her, something stronger than the hurt, stronger than the anger. It was the realization that she had the power to change her own fate. She had the power to take control of her life again, to stop being a pawn in someone else's game. She looked at her mother-in-law one last time, her eyes filled with defiance. "I don't need your approval. I don't need your control. And I don't need you." The silence that followed was deafening. Ria's mother-in-law stood there, seething with rage, her face twisted in disbelief. Arav was still staring at her, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and determination. He stepped toward Ria, reaching out for her hand. "Ria," he said softly, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. But I promise you, I'll make things right. I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to you." Ria hesitated for a moment, but then she looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges. But the truth had come out, and for the first time in a long time, Ria felt like she had a choice again. A choice to take back her life. A choice to rebuild everything she had lost. Slowly, she reached out and took Arav's hand. Together, they turned their backs on her mother-in-law, on the house that had once felt like a place of safety. But now, it was just a reminder of everything that had been taken from her. As they walked away, Ria's heart ached, but it also swelled with a new strength. She had uncovered the truth. She had faced her fears, and now she was free. They didn't need to look back. The past had no power over them anymore. And as they walked toward the unknown future, Ria knew one thing for certain. No one could control her again.